So welcome to the Women in VR and Immersive Entertainment panel. I'm Taryn Southern. I'm replacing the moderator in the booklet, so I'll just give you a little background on me. I'm a TV host / producer, also a content creator, got 500,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel. And my production company, Happy Cat Media, focuses on digital-first production and consulting. We produce digital series for brands like The Today Show, Condé Nast, Marriott, MovieTickets.com. We did a feature for Vimeo Originals, and we have a bunch of fun projects in development. But I'm particularly excited about the VR space. It kind of feels a lot like the early days of YouTube when we were feeling really disruptive 6 or 7 years ago and didn't know how to make money from it. So it's an honor to be on this panel today. You all are incredibly impressive, as evidenced from the call that we did earlier this week. So I'll just let you each introduce yourself. We'll just start with, why don't we start with Jen over at the other end and just tell everyone who you are and about the company you work with.
I have way too much energy, so we're gonna bring this house of
my
people down. I'm very excited. So my name is Jen, and I'm the director of VR at 1215 Creative. We're a creative agency and production company, so we oftentimes work with a lot of blue chip brands as well as music festivals who cannot be named because our industry is full of NDAs that no one follows. That being said, I am also the co-founder of Shift, which is a nonprofit that supports diversity and inclusion, and by extension, women in VR.
My name is Jody Beliveau. I'm the director of product development at Weaver, and Weaver creates content, and we also create software to distribute content. My product is transport.
My name's Julina Tatlock. I'm founder of 30 Ninjas, which is a production company. We specialize in interactive and VR storytelling. I founded the company with Doug Lyman. I'm a director of one of the directors for our first VR series called Invisible, which is directed also by Doug and written by Melissa Wallach.
Hi, everyone. My name is Camille Cannongeiser. I'm the co-founder and CCO of Freeform Labs. We're an AR/VR content company focusing on family-friendly, interactive, creative VR content.
Hi, I'm Christina Heller. I'm the CEO and co-founder of VR Playhouse. We are a creative studio and full-service production company specializing in VR here in Los Angeles.
Hi, I'm Mary Ermitania, and I work with Manat Digital Media. We are a hybrid law, consulting, and venture capital firm. On the legal side, we represent a couple of VR companies, and on the VC side, our fund's been around for almost 20 years, and in the past couple of years, we've been focusing on digital media. On the business advisory side, I work with media and tech companies, a lot in the traditional media space. And my clients are looking to develop their VR capabilities, and so we help them develop market strategies, and more importantly, I think strategic partnerships in this very collaborative space.
Awesome. Welcome, all of you. Since this is the Women in VR panel and we're all women, let's just start by attacking the topic at hand, which is how active do you think the female voice is currently in the development of VR projects and technologies within each of your companies, and what you're also seeing in the space around you. Who wants to get started? Jen, you're the excited one, so.
Come on, you said you were ready. I'm like, oh no, I hope they don't go to me for this question. I'm actually the first VR hire over at the creative agency and production company, and it does help that because I am the director of VR, I oversee the entire production, post-production process, as well as all VR initiatives that we head up. So I make it a point to find really strong women that excel in whatever it is that they do and bring them on board, as well as balancing that team out with men, because I think it's important to have a difference of perspective and diversity when you're in a medium like this, and kind of just in life in general. In terms of the women voice in the space, I think VR is so early, and we're seeing the convergence of entertainment and tech kind of coming together, and these are industries whose histories don't necessarily have a lot of women in them in terms of like, 50-50 ratios and all that jazz. So what's unique is there's kind of been this revitalized movement, and it's a rebirth of we need diversity in VR, and we need women in VR. We need underrepresented groups in VR. So I've been in this really interesting position because I've seen how women have really come kind of into their own and making their own ways and paving paths for so many people in VR. I mean, look at this panel alone. You have the head of product at one of the most well-known VR startups. You have multiple people who are making strides. I mean, everyone here has a title of co-founder or CCO. They're at that C executive level, and that's huge. And so I hope we continue to see VR companies carry this out as this industry grows and really solidifies. It's too early to tell, but become opportunity to make sure that there is not a glass ceiling. And I'd rather die before I see VR turn into like Games 2.0 or Film 2.0. So really excited that there's a lot of women in this audience.
I'll jump in. So, my company's we've got like the production company side and then the creative studio side. So the production company side will make VR products or like content for whoever can pay us to do it. And so, we did 15 projects last year, most of which were client work. And I can't say that, a lot of the content was like spoke to me personally. Like we would make it and we'd make it to the absolute best of our ability based on what the client was asking us to make. But like, I would watch the pieces and I'm like, this isn't the kind of thing that I would watch in my free time, and then, the stuff we make internally, obviously, since I'm in a position of leadership at the company, like I am, have a lot of influence over what gets made or what doesn't. And so I would say that there is sort of at least the female perspective coming through the stuff that we try to make in-house. But that being said, like I agree with Jen, I think it is still really early, and I've been getting, as we've been doing more of these women panels and things, I've been getting approached by more people who are interested in tackling the female sort of demographic in VR. And so I think that this year and next year we're going to start seeing a lot of things that kind of like focus on, I would say, what is more typically female interests. I do hesitate though, because it's interesting, and I'll say this like sort of at the beginning of the panel, it's sort of a weird thing to be like, what's content made for girls and what's content made for boys? I think we're kind of moving sort of generationally into something where like gender is sort of a little bit more fluid and identity is more fluid. So, I'm always like, I get a little nervous being like, well, fashion content is for girls, because like plenty of guys like fashion content too. But typically I would say things like fashion and beauty like is a very underrepresented sort of content space right now in VR. And I do think we'll see that changing this year.
Yeah, and just to jump in, I think it's very possible and should be pursued to make content that appeals to both men and women. Ideally, we'll speak to some deeper part of our humanity if we have really diverse teams and content that can speak to a wider range of viewers who experience these products. So what we've been able to do at Freeform Labs is, as a co-founder with two other gentlemen, again, I'm also able to bring female perspective to what we're able to make. And we've taken some steps in the type of avatar that the person embodies and some of our experiences to be something that women and men would feel comfortable in. And the type of content that we're making isn't necessarily geared towards the classic hardcore gamer, but it's not solely geared towards the generally more female casual game, mobile game audience. We're trying to strike a balance between those two.
Mm-hmm. And Jody, how about you as director of product development? How do you see the female voice playing into the tech side of the space?
Well, I build UIs that everyone needs to be able to navigate through, so I don't know if women or men are very different. They just want to get to the content as quickly as possible. I am one of the few female voices at the company, and I've kind of collected the rest of them around me. So, so we can get shit done.
There we go.
But yeah, I guess in persona development, we went with the 60-40 split, so 60% male, 40% female. So I definitely have a female persona that I'm developing the product for. So I guess that's how I pull in the female voice, but I do that with all of my products. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Have any of you actually seen any pieces of content you could point to that you feel were developed specifically for a female demographic?
Yeah, there was that one piece, it's terrible, I can't remember what the product was, but like where it was this guy, he was like proposing to you. Did anybody else see it? Like there's I want to say it was like The Bachelor, but it wasn't something like that.
Fulfilling
But
every woman's marriage dreams.
yeah, there was like this one piece I watched where this guy, you're like in a house and you're looking, I think you're the real estate agent and the guy is looking at the house, and halfway through he is like, wow, you know me so well. Like, you found the house of my dreams and I think I'm falling in love with you. Anyway, so that was clearly for at least I would say heterosexual female or homosexual male, and because the guys at, I know the guy, we made everybody at VR Playhouse watch it because it was one of the better like examples of having a body, which is this constant thing in VR of like, how do you make the body? And so it was like one of the better examples of like where a body worked, but all the guys were like, you could just see them like, because they're straight guys, like they were putting it on, they were like, I don't know how to feel about this right now.
I guess that's one of the fun things about VR is that you're letting people experience totally different things and be in totally different situations than they would ever create for themselves. So
and I think when you think about VR as sort of that empathy machine that people refer to it to, it's almost resetting experience. And I think I read about this one experience by the Emblematic group. I haven't tried it, but where they put the viewer in the perspective of a woman. So imagine walking down the street and getting hit on by guys, and men actually feeling that and seeing it and experiencing it from a woman's perspective. I think it's a really great way to sort of reset those experiences and to bring the women's perspective really and make it accessible to men and everyone else.
I also think a lot of the documentary work, I don't know, I believe that making stories specifically for women is often an advertiser construct.
Yes.
Not actually a way to necessarily make a great story. The best storytellers just make a great reality show, and more women happen to watch it, but networks sell it against the women demographic. So right now, because we're not able to buy, or we're just starting to be able to buy gear and the Oculus for our kids, which is when I think the market will totally open up. Most of the people who have that technology at home are the early adopters, which do tend to skew male. But we're going to turn the dial automatically. I mean, there are pieces on the Vive like the Rose and I, which are crazy, beautiful pieces, which women and men will just adore. And then as storytellers, I think from our perspective, we are just making great stories, trying to. I mean, we are a largely skewed female group. Doug is a founder, but our group Invisible, there are it's a woman writer, 2 women executive producers, a woman line producer, and our client, Condé Nast, is the woman Dawn Ostroff is the president of Condé Nast. Jaunt and Samsung are our other partners for Invisible, and they are much more heavily. In fact, I think I know one woman at Jaunt.
Catherine,
I don't know Catherine. We know Brooke. I know Brooke, but I actually don't know very many women at Jaunt.
There's like 3, like literally 3, minus the receptionist.
Excellent.
If anyone was wondering.
So I guess I come to no conclusion for that, except for when you're in an emerging platform and an emerging media, you start with even ground to some extent, and everybody, and to separate the bullshit from reality and merit, it's an opportunity for all of us to encourage people to speak their mind and try and do the best at their jobs.
Yeah. And I just wanted to add to that. I think, we see VR as green fields for our client, and it's not only from a business model perspective, because right now you don't have established business models, but it's also in terms of the talent and the people involved, because I think at this point there's no established role, or there's no strict rule of how you do things and what type of background you have to have. I think right now it's open to any background, and it's not so much about who you are and what your background is, but it's about what you can bring to the table and what you can create. And then that goes back to it just being, again, a very new opportunity.
I want to touch a little bit on a comment that you made, Juliana, which I thought was really great insight about how advertising drives, these business models and therefore the audiences. If we're looking at YouTube as an example, a lot of the female content has been driven by the advertisers coming in and funneling money into that funnel, opening it up. So we see a lot more fashion and beauty vloggers driving the industry. Similarly, you were talking about, Christina, your production company, maybe getting a lot of commissioned work that doesn't necessarily speak to you. So in this sort of nascent world where we're depending on dollars from brands or whatever to fund these companies, how can we also ensure that we're making content that doesn't necessarily fit within a specific advertiser's target demo, so that we do open up the door to other audiences? Is there a way to do that? Are you looking at that within your companies?
For us, it's partnering. I go back to, I don't think I'm that atypical in that I like to go see action movies, and my partner is an action film director, and his films happen to be some of my favorite films, Mrs. and Mrs. Smith, The Bourne Identity, all that stuff. And so we're making an action thriller, but the writer is Melissa Wallach, who also wrote Dallas Buyers Club. So I think what we're looking for are distributing partners who want to make great content. I think that it's a harder sell. We're right now in this cusp where you're in a proof of concept for a technology, so people are willing to place big bets. Mm-hmm. And once you have to get you have to get subscription model or you have to get advertiser model, you're going to see much more of a distillation of brands and channels like you do on cable.
Right. Great.
There's no money in VR. There's no money in VR unless even in games right now, it's very limited. People are just getting their CV1s. Other CV1s are delayed. People are just getting the Vives, so there's that. A lot of people who are making money in VR, it's either because they, as a company, are fundraising, so they're raising their seed, their series, which is great. Like, Weaver and Jaunt notably have raised millions of dollars, which is phenomenal because it's showing that there is a lot of interest in this industry. But it's like a lot of the money is in B2B content, which ends up being advertising. And I think part of getting more content out there that's sort of outside of that realm is, as creators, we have to take a risk. We have to be willing to say, like, hey, there's this phenomenal story that I want to tell that doesn't necessarily fit for me to sell this to Forever 21, to whatever potential agency or brand. And it's one of those things where with great risk comes great reward. I mean, when film came up, they probably weren't thinking like, how can I make the most money out of this? And I personally think right now, if you're trying to make money in VR, you're going to burn out and you're not going to make it. This is a long haul play, and it has to be a play that you're willing to get yourself into to be here for at least 5 years before we really see there start to be money in VR for content creators.
Mm-hmm. And right now, sorry, Wayne.
Oh, I was going to say we're at an early enough point in the industry where if you make something and put it out there, you're going to get a lot of the early adopter eyeballs on it, and that can set the trend for the type of content that does get advertised. And so the way that you put your content out into the social media space can influence the way things get advertised in the future if it does well.
Yeah, actually, I swear this isn't a shameless plug, but there's a piece that came out today that we did with Jaunt and Catherine over at Jaunt that is it's a cool piece in that it's an all-women mariachi band that is pretty popular on NPR and stuff like that. And we did a cool Cinco de Mayo piece with them, with this all-female mariachi band, a bunch of women dancers in this beautiful cathedral downtown called Vibiana. And, to make that piece, Catherine over at Jaunt this was like her dream. She had wanted to make this for a while, and she came to VR Playhouse to ask if we would help, and we did. And in some ways we did it because it wasn't like a big, moneymaker for us. That wasn't why we did it. We did it because we were like, I wanted to work with Catherine. We thought it was a cool piece of content. And so speaking to what Jen is saying, I think like if you want to get more like sort of diverse content into the ecosystem, you got to kind of suck it up and figure out how to make it, whether those brand dollars or just industry dollars are there or not. And that can be a challenge for people who are, a production company in the space, because I guess we kind of have a certain amount of, passion. We can only do a certain amount of passion projects every quarter, and then we have to take whatever the big paying job is to be able to keep the lights on and keep the staff employed. So I guess, honestly, the best way to make the projects that we want to see right now is to make them at all costs.
Are you seeing people deficit finance out of their studio for these projects? I mean, how much more expensive is it to do a VR, self-finance a VR project versus an indie film, right? I mean, I feel like a lot of content creators still think the barrier to entry is too high if you don't have a team.
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, it's very expensive because, as I'm sure a lot of you know, the teams that you need to make high quality VR content are extremely specialized, and they work in programs that require a lot of training, and so you have to pay them accordingly to that skill. So, for us, it's always this balance of of just kind of weighing all the potential outcomes, will there be, will it be good marketing for the company? Will it be a piece that gets a lot of eyeballs? Do we have to go out of pocket, or can we break even? And and so often, a project comes across the desk that we want desperately to make, but I just can't figure out how to make it make sense for us without threatening the health of our organization. And so we unfortunately have to pass. But there are projects I think that hit that sweet spot. We're working on a music video right now that I think hits that sweet spot. And when you can, it's the best, because you're making art with your friends, and you can move the needle of the VR industry a little bit. And I think that's why we're all in it right now, right?
I think also it depends on what kind of creator, what kind of company you are. I mean, there are people who are building verticals where they're doing product, and they're doing the stitching, and they're doing the post-production, and they're doing. And then there are people who are trying to do everything, and you're raising money against that. What we're doing is making strategic partnerships with a VFX company and with an equipment company, and really collecting an A team for all that we can then make our content, but we're not placing our bets across the board. We're sticking with what we're good at, and then collecting people. And it's really, that's I think it's really important when you want to make a specific thing. You can't, to deficit finance and become an actual VR studio, you do need to be like a Jaunt or you guys. Do you know what I mean?
Or you just have to have really great people working with you that are excited. You know what I mean? You do it the old indie film way, which luckily before this that was what I did. Kickstarters, Indiegogos, hey, favor.
And you give people a voice. I mean, the fact that VFX, Chris Healer, the head of the Molecule, was with us every single day and on set. And John was there with us every single day. And they, and you go in with these expectations on the tech, and tech, you cannot dismiss it in this medium. It's quickest route to bankruptcy, to ignore post-production. So, and that can be alienating, I think, for women who don't come from a tech background. But if you choose your partners right, there's a lot of empowerment there. I mean, it's just, you can invite men to your table just as easily as you can wait for the invitation.
Amazing. We'll come back to the topic of getting more women into VR, but I want to mix things up a little bit and move into a topic of conversation that's huge right now in this space, porn. And, women should be a part of this conversation too, on the executive side, not just the on-camera talent side. So what are you guys seeing in the porn space as far as women and their voice? Anything of interest? Okay. Jen?
Yeah, Jen.
How is sexuality driving innovation and consumption in this?
I'm so sorry. I was super amped to talk about porn, and I wouldn't shut up about it prior to this panel. So they're Jen, they're gonna differ. Real quick, in terms of women leadership in porn, I don't know if you guys have heard of her. Her name is Ella Darling. She's actually a good friend of mine, as well as many people on this panel. She is literally the poster child for porn right now in VR. It's amazing. She is making so many strides. She's incredibly intelligent. She actually got her master's at 21. So I know a lot of people are quick to judge when someone says, I work in adult entertainment, but she's smart with a business sense, and she's making a point that women feel comfortable in front of and behind of the camera, especially moving forward with porn and VR. In terms of sexuality driving consumption, I am going to preface this with these opinions are my own, and you don't have to agree. I just ask that you're open-minded to it. And the fact that I am not the type of person to polarize anything, saying like men are better than women, women are better than men. I think at the end of the day, we are all equal, and we need to work towards equal opportunity and inclusion. That being said, looking at traditional porn, it tends to be very male-centric and tailored towards men. But the fact is, there's more diversity in porn than there is in the tech industry and entertainment industry combined. And looking at that, I think we have to take into consideration two things. Is the porn industry lucrative? I would be very naive if I said no. But it's one of those things where when we think about why do people watch porn, and it's a human emotion that actually drives consumption. It's that need for sexuality and that need for exploration for people who may not be comfortable exploring that in real life. It gives them that opportunity to explore. And then you look at the types of porn that is being made. You have everything, like literally go on Reddit, Tumblr, Google, like various porn sites, and you can find everything. You can find guy on guy, girl on girl, like just even they break down porn by races. You can find Asian porn, African American porn, Hispanic porn, white porn, like old porn, young porn. It's the amount of diversity in terms of content is huge. And I think that that is a huge reason why porn is the multi-billion-dollar industry it is today. Because you have content that so many people can actually go, oh, I enjoy that, or oh, I like that. And to be very honest, I think VR can learn a thing or two from that. So
You're saying from the the fact that there's a
Yeah.
like a huge slate of diverse content.
there's a huge
Yeah.
slate of diverse content, and it's one of those things where even I'm not in the porn industry, I will also preface that, so there's only so much insight I can provide.
She's a VR porn evangelist.
Yes, I'm a VR porn evangelist. I will advocate for porn all the way till the end of my career, until no one wants to hire me anymore, which is fine. But it's one of those things where, you know, there are people that actually want to be in this industry. There are women that actually want to be in this industry. And so for viewers to always be like, oh, porn is like so meant for men, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, you're gonna tell me that most women in this world don't enjoy porn? Like, really? And I think that there's empowerment for those people who choose to go into that industry. It's a slightly different topic when it's like, oh, they don't have another option. But there are people who do choose to go into that industry, and props to them, and I hope we see that in VR, and especially in terms of VR porn. And I'm going to stop ranting about this.
Any other thoughts from the other panelists in this area?
I just think about the feature set you might develop. You know, the perspective. Maybe you could switch it from the male-female perspective. I don't
Well,
know.
that's what I'm wondering. I mean, it feels like from everyone who I've heard, everyone who I know who's actually tried out some of the porn programs, they've all been male. And I'm sure that there have been females, but I haven't heard of any women trying this stuff out. Are they making content right now with the female porn consumer in mind?
I have no idea, but if it came to my product, that's what I would try to switch it up.
Yeah.
Well, this could be an interesting segue to the social VR conversation, because like I think I don't know. I'll admit I've watched a couple of the VR porn things for research, but I've watched a couple of them, and I think they're kind of cheesy. Like they're like, oh, it's 360 degrees, so we'll just put girls all around you. Like I don't know, but I think that the really cool sort of like exploration of sexuality in VR will begin when it's like social. And maybe when, things like gender are things that you can choose you can choose what avatar you have, and then you can have perhaps an actual intimate encounter with somebody who is not physically close to you at all. That I think is when it starts getting really interesting. This is still just like what we're seeing now is like what we're seeing I think a lot in VR, which is like taking an old model and cramming it into the 360 or VR space. So they're like, okay, we'll take what was a porn film and make now a porn film in 360, and
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work, but I do think there's going to be some very interesting developments as VR as an actual medium develops and the capabilities sort of evolve. And obviously, as you said, like sex is a huge driver of industry. So as soon as those capabilities become like something we can actually access, then yeah, we'll see. It'll be really cool.
And there are people working on that type of experience too. And it's one of the things that, again, the industry is so early. I've seen traditional porn that is girl perspective. This was for research, obviously. But it's like, I have no doubt that we're also going to see that in VR, you know? And I would just like to tack on to Christina's point. Yes, what worked in film doesn't necessarily work in VR, guys. Just because it worked on a flat screen doesn't mean it's going to work 360, so please be mindful of that.
I mean, it's very similar with what happened with early cinema, right? You started with recording theater plays, and that didn't necessarily take advantage of the opportunities that cinema ended up discovering and really characterizing it as its own very compelling medium. So I think it's up to all of us who are involved in the space to really push the boundaries of VR beyond the traditional flat screen approaches that we've all been either trained in or exposed to.
I think maybe just one concern for porn in VR, and really this applies to everywhere, is when it gets to a point where it's just so enjoyable in VR, and you don't want to look for it in reality anymore, then that's a risk.
I don't know. I feel like that's not going to happen. I just feel like we're humans. We crave human interaction. We crave, a hug. Maybe some of you guys don't like hugs, but it's like we need that sense of interaction. And yes, VR is this intimate, immersive medium. These are like all the buzzwords that we consistently use to describe VR. But by no means do I think VR will ever replace me talking to Jody in person. As much as I may like talking to you in alt space, nothing's going to replace me going out and getting a cup of coffee with her. I think as humans, that's something that we're going to kind of latch onto. And I think the moment that we start letting go of that's the moment we start losing what makes us human. Mm-hmm. And I hope that doesn't happen.
I like that. Julina, did you have something to say too?
I was just going to say that part of the power that you're talking about, like of owning the IP also, that porn is something that you can create the content and own the IP, which actually is in itself, that's the empowering business model. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And in terms of for research, we've had several meetings where you're in a group of people who are thinking about how to cover a scene, and we're looking at porn rigs, and we're looking at porn shots, and does this shot work, and does that shot work, because there's so much more experimentation to that side of the industry. And then one more thing, you talk about exploring the space and what works for film and what doesn't work for film. I think the reverse is true too, where we have found the group of VR people on set going, that's not going to work for VR. I'm not sure that shot's worth it. It's going to cost this much money, and it really might not work. And then, you have Simon Crane, who's one of the top stunt coordinators and second unit directors in the world, and he's like, we are getting this shot. And you're afraid he's going to walk off. And you know what? The shot is fucking awesome. And you broke all the rules, every single rule. Mm-hmm. And we'll have to stabilize some of it, but really, in terms of coverage, it's one of the most exciting things we did. And so, it goes all, I don't know, there's no right answer. Mm-hmm.
Best practices are guidelines, not rules. So, experiment, try the stuff that does work in the regular medium. If it works, stick with it. If not, move on to something else. And don't be afraid to pull from various industries and forms of entertainment, be that from gaming or film, combining those, or, down to porn and how that's shot. So keep your options open.
And on that point, before we open it up for questions, what are some specific technologies or storytelling tools that you all find particularly exciting within your fields that you'd like to point to? Maybe we'll start with Jody. No?
I'll just jump in and say,
go for it.
For in terms of easy consumer stuff, I would say we relied on the Theta a huge amount for location scouting and for actually testing. For when I was directing and we'd enter a location and just actually do the shot in Theta and then be able to watch it. I think also storyboarding. I mean, in terms of tools, I rely largely on my team. One of them is right there, Lewis Smithingham. But, on stuff that I would actually use, I would say the Theta was our top one.
Great.
For me, so I've been going to VR conferences just really starting about 2 years ago, and I've really seen it evolve from, say, VR LA, 2 years ago or a year and a half ago. Everyone's just sitting down, kind of looking around, to Silicon Virtual Reality Conference just last week. Everyone's moving around, and you have full spaces, and it's all very interactive. And they even had a section where you had 5 people playing games in virtual reality, so you saw how that looked like. And so it's really exciting for me is just the whole interactivity piece of it. And the motion controllers that are now available and coming out, all the input devices all together that create that interactive experience. And so that includes like haptic feedback suits, which by the way, I wonder how that works when porn VR and if they're working on that. But but just the medium becoming more immersive, and I feel like the future of film will be interactive. I mean, there's still the passive piece of it. There's always going to be that use case, but interactivity will be a big part of film in the future.
Yeah, I suppose if you're really interested in getting more involved with the VR industry, going to panels like this is a good way to start. It's a good way to go. But go to the conferences, be active online. We've got the Women in VR group that Jen runs that's got over 2,000 members. There are
on Facebook.
On Facebook, yep. There are great discussions, fantastic articles that are being posted daily. So getting in touch with the very active community is a great way to go.
Also, I love, I like the Vive. I'm a huge fan of the Vive. I don't know why I didn't think of this before. It just occurred to me like a couple days ago. I'm like, why don't I try storyboarding in the Vive?
It's fantastic.
It's amazing. Do it. Like, hands down, if you're interested in storytelling and you're just getting into it, if you get that opportunity to actually, in a way, build your story in a 3D environment, whether it's X's, if you can't draw stick figures, whatever, like, I was like, oh, this is subject 1. I would think that this would be X amount away from the camera. I think I would put a light here and a light there, and you're able to stand where the rig is and look around and go, does this work? And yes, it's just a SketchUp, but it gives you a good idea of how it works. And when you bring clients in, you can kind of stick them in it and be like, this is what we're thinking. And they oftentimes find that really compelling and tangible.
Yeah, so. Especially when you're working with people who aren't familiar with VR, who haven't tried on a headset or haven't tried a really compelling experience yet. It gets kind of tough to explain what your creative vision is out of thin air. Even with visuals, it's not like being there, right? So having a demo or some kind of basic prototype, even if it's a bunch of gray boxes in Unity, that can help a ton because they understand the stereoscopic nature of what you're trying to do, the movement, the pacing of the piece that you're trying to explain.
And I'm going to echo what Mary said, which is I'm really excited as I feel like for a while we've been talking about kind of the promise of what could be storytelling in VR as a blend of games and movies. And so the stuff that gets me really excited is the things that blends like game engine and live action and CGI. And I think we're just beginning to sort of crack the codes on how that will work, but that is going to be like how VR distinguishes itself as a storytelling medium compared to the more passive viewing entertainment of TV and movies.
Yeah, and as far as tools go, I mean, Unity, Unreal, CryEngine, they all have VR support. They're going to have increasing VR support, which is fantastic. So, yeah.
Okay, awesome. I want to open it up to the audience. Do any of you have any questions? Yes.
I'm surprised that 6 women on a panel, that the biggest topic of conversation on this panel is porn. And that there was no really discussion of education and what it would be like to teach languages and take people to countries and things like that. And of all people, you girls should be most protective of young women, which is going to be the skew of the demographic of younger kids that is going to play with this stuff. Why would you even want to be involved with letting them see anything like that it shouldn't even exist? It doesn't make sense to me at all. You should be protecting kids from it. You shouldn't be talking about it. It should be everyone. You should be. Well,
look, okay, I'm gonna jump in for a second because the truth is like what I think the reason it's been mentioned is because it's an enormous industry and it is absolutely something that we can't ignore. It's like saying I'm not going to talk about cell phones because I don't think they're healthy for humanity. Like, we do need to talk about it. And I think that, like, to defend sort of like the people that were into it, I mean, I think that the way that we could protect women, because the truth is that porn isn't going away. So the way that you can protect it is by becoming like more involved. That being said, I have no interest in getting involved with VR porn. VR Playhouse has no interest in getting into that sector. And I think you're right. Like, I wish we had talked about education on this panel. It's a great opportunity for VR. I think there's a lot that we can talk about in that space. But I think that the reason it was brought up on this women's panel is because it's typically shied away from on women's panels.
Exactly.
And as people who are in a lot of the pieces, not us, but women, like, you know, getting our perspective and having it not just be a blanket like demonizing of the whole industry is sort of the point.
And also
the parents out there that are going to be buying product for their kids.
Right.
And if you're putting product out, they won't buy your product.
Well,
Well, there's the internet. A lot of people use that for education, but it can also be used for other things. And also saying that just because we're women that we need to be the sole defenders of our youth, I think is unfair to the men who are also responsibly addressing this situation. That's a responsibility that we all share. It takes a village to raise a child. It takes a community to well educate and well protect our youth. I don't think it is appropriate for kids to randomly stumble upon this content. That means we need to have well-designed UI, we need to have well-designed platforms so that there isn't any confusion about what kind of content parents are allowing for their children or what they're being exposed to. I think creative play at any age, and that goes for like games are for adults, just like, you know, we just need to make the content readily accessible to the right kind of people, and only the right kind of people, especially with something as particular as porn. As far as education goes, it's something that's talked about on most VR panels. I think we discussed something a little bit different here. Education is huge. It's going to fix the pipeline problem that we have. Right now, we don't have enough women in technology and games and entertainment. But by speaking at schools, creating clubs like VRSC on university campuses, by speaking at young elementary schools and middle schools, that's going to inspire young women to say, hey, this person is like me, maybe I can be like her when I grow up. And that's going to be huge in changing the landscape of the industry. Having quotas that are randomly set, that are we need X many women within 2 years, it's hard to fix that problem when the next great creator might be in middle school. And she's just learning about the technology now, and she's going to be a big name in 5-10 years.
Well said. Camille.
Yes.
Can any of you comment on if there's any particular feature or lack of features in hardware or applications that would make VR more attractive to women? Again, there might be stereotyping that it's less attractive, but there's this sense that the gadget head demographic is smaller among women, so how do we make this less stigmatized?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable concern. I think for one, you had mentioned the haptic feedback suits, right? And having that be used for all kinds of gaming applications. There was a woman who wrote an article that said, you know, she tried on the haptic suit and it was made for a guy and she was like 5'2", and it didn't fit her. So the experience wasn't right. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't as immersive as it should have been. So I think making hardware that is sized for women, I'm on the taller end of the spectrum, so I don't really run into that ever, but you know,
and I'm on the smaller end, so I run into that all the time. And the
right, and
conferences
so
and
having
the gloves are
controls
always too big for me.
Yeah, having controls that you can comfortably hold, and this goes for kids as well. If we want it to be available to the currently 13 and up demographic, we need to keep in mind the younger end of the spectrum and how big everyone's hands are, and that kind of hardware.
And I think that's also even more opportunity for diversity, where you bring in maybe folks in the fashion industry, and it's really, I think, points to the fact that people from different backgrounds can come together and really build the ecosystem.
And like Wearables has been addressing this with marketing their technology in different ways that seems to strike better well with men or women, young or old. So taking a note from fashion and the kind of wearables industry could be something that we learn from.
I would also say as a parent that probably for me and my husband to have either the Vive or to have anything in the home having it be both a one-to-game experience, but also have it be on the screen, so you're watching what the child is doing and playing. It's one of the best things about watching your kid play Minecraft or watching your kid play whatever game they're playing, because you can also see what they're doing at the same time. So they're having their own experience, but it's also something of a family experience. So you can, and it's important in a family unit. And if there's, so making that connection easily understood for the consumer so that they can see that and have that be part of the experience, just that's me personally.
Yeah. And I don't know if this would be a feature tailored just specifically for women, but I think like when I'm in Milk VR or on Viridio Little Star, having voice recognition when I search, I think that's just something that we all would love and need, because like it's, especially like say, it's one thing being in the gear and you can just like pluck around and touch the touchpad, but if you're in a cardboard VR, to have to take it out every time and then load it back in, I think it turns a lot of people off from VR because it's a lot more work, and unfortunately our society has gotten lazier a little bit.
Right. Well, and you have that thing that we used to have, right? Back in the World Wide Web days of too many clicks to get to the content. It's all
Reduce
about
friction. Yeah.
Yeah.
But everybody wants that, not just women.
Exactly. I know. Yeah.
Amazing.
I don't know, the strap, the VR hair, that could be a thing. Get rid of that.
Yeah.
The men have that.
I've seen so many men who've been like, but my do.
I know.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely.
I feel like the men are worse about that.
Yeah, it's definitely. But yeah, the headsets are not at a point where if I wasn't in VR that I would put them on every day. You know, like I do think when they become as easy to put on as sunglasses, that's when it's going to be real game on.
All right, Irad.
I like the comments about sort of using different tools that you would expect, like Theta or prototyping on the Vive. Do you guys have any other suggestions on how to prototype and sort of plan out VR projects?
And the question for the live stream viewers is any suggestions on how to prototype or try out VR products outside of the Theta?
Vive.
We do a brute force. I mean, we do as much as we can on paper, but we have to see it in the 3D space, so we have to build it. Mm-hmm. And that is new for me, coming from the 2D product side, going into 3D, is there's just really no way to avoid iterations in the code.
Oh yeah.
We also did use SketchUp with our art director, so we would do the location and then build in Unity and play also with camera position and stuff like that. And I do know, I mean, I have a friend, Charles Foreman, who was working, he has a storyboard for flat storyboard screenwriting stuff, but there's ways to do that he's actually working on creating a storyboard program actually where you can do it within space as well. And
I'll jump in, like, to go like super low tech, one of the ways that you can ensure good performances is by doing old-fashioned rehearsals. You know, a lot of because some of our team has a theater background, and I found that like when we're doing something with actors, we do like way more rehearsals for a VR piece than we would maybe for a filmed piece, and it's because of the fact that the takes are long and timing is super important, and the actors have to hit their marks, not too dissimilar to a stage performance. So I do think making sure that you schedule and enforce rehearsals with actors is very important.
Yeah, and when you do approach storyboarding, the classic way to do it with, if you have an art background or film background, is the panel that shows what the camera sees. Another way that you can approach it is drawing out the full scene from like a 3/4 aerial view and indicate this is where the camera is and these are all the key items that the player will see. It doesn't show scale that well, but it does show like the full feel of the environment pretty well.
Mm-hmm. Yes? She's asking what are some resources for practical knowledge for producers who are active in the media space and want to get into VR.
The Making 360 guide that came out recently is excellent and very thorough, and I think it's free, right? It's free online?
It is free.
Yeah, it's free. So yeah, if you Google Making 360, there's a really great guide that was made by some very experienced production people inside the space.
And also, There are some workshops being done by VRLA, so the Virtual Reality Los Angeles Conference. They have, I don't remember what the program is called exactly. I think it's like VR School.
It's the
VR School. Yeah, and so they have workshops where you can get your hands dirty with the tech and start working with it. Even if you don't have a technical background, you can hop on a team with someone who does and just see the way that they work and what their pipeline is.
And if you're a member of YouTube Space, they also provide monthly 1-day or 2-day VR workshops where you're hands-on working with the cameras, learning how to stitch in post-production, and that's a fantastic way and those workshops are free.
Yeah. There are also some events at USC on occasion. So VRSC is another great group that does outreach and workshops and events.
And something that could just be fun for you as a producer, because yes, you're not the director or, creative, you're more the person that puts all the pieces together. If you can either borrow like a 4-camera rig from someone or even a Theta and going out and just kind of playing with it yourself, it's one of those things where there's no better way to learn VR other than just doing it. Because then you can understand the process of like, oh, that's a stitch line. I'm in the stitch line, even on the Theta. And they're very minimal, but you can kind of start getting a feel, realizing like, okay, I need a stitcher, and taking your knowledge from traditional media going, how does a compositor fit into this? How does a rotoscoping artist fit into this? Like all of that knowledge, those roles still kind of apply to VR.
Amazing. I think we have time for one quick question.
Sure. You spoke briefly about IP ownership, which I think is particularly interesting within the space. How does that apply to women and in the context of ownership?
The question is, how does IP ownership apply to the context of women and ownership?
Well, we need to be able to, creating IP is like the most exciting opportunity, I think, in VR right now, because it's wide open and the market is not only global but growing. The challenge, it's interesting. We've been getting a lot of interest from China. There seems to be a very excited market in China, and so I've been getting a lot of calls about original IP, specifically for a Chinese audience. But I know that, again, the biggest challenge for our studio is being able to fit in the time to make original creative IP while also doing the production services work that keeps our company afloat. So, yeah, I don't think it pertains to women. I think it pertains to startups. But it would be great to be seeing more funding coming into to invest in slates of content. And I think that probably everybody up here has a slate that they would like to see funded. So if that's interesting to you, and I think and you have that kind of money, I think that there's a really exciting opportunity for original IP, and particularly right now for an international audience.
Quick comment on that. We didn't touch on this, but just as much as we need diversity in women in content, we need them on the investment side as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a quick shout out on that end, there's a women-run venture capital fund called SoGal that's been really active here in the US. They've also expanded to Asia recently, so they're definitely people to keep an eye out for.
Awesome. Well, that is the end of our time here on the panel. Thank you all so much for joining us.